Countywide, I'm Paul.
It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. Great to have you in studio with us today. Prescott National Forest Fire Staff Officer Pete Gordon, welcome.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Good to have you in studio. We're doing a lot of shows this month about fires, fire-wise, defensible space. We've got a guy coming in next week to show us fire gear. And today you're here, and it's very timely, because on April 18th, which is tomorrow, but we've got to say April 18th for the show's sake, because we will re-air this program, Level 1 fire restrictions go into place, Stage 1.
Correct. Across
most of the area, it seems like.
Yeah, it's forest-wide on the Prescott National Forest, and we also coordinate with our adjoining forest, the Kaibab, the Coconino National Forest, as well as the Tano. And we've all agreed, due to conditions and the fact that fire activity is already picking up, that we'll all go on the 18th into Stage 1 restrictions. In addition to that, a great deal of coordination here in Yavapai County, both in the Prescott Basin area and in the Verde Valley, with the county emergency services, as well as our neighboring fire departments. And we'll all be going together here on the 18th in the Prescott area, and I think shortly followed here in the Verde Valley area with some sort of burn ban or similar restrictions where it's not federal land.
So kind of tell me, what does Stage 1 restrictions when it comes to going on the Prescott National Forest, what does that mean?
It's fairly simple. The two biggest things about Stage 1 restrictions, number one is campfires are restricted to just developed campsites only, places where you would pay to go camp with the picnic tables and the big metal rings. That is the only place in which you can have a campfire. It's very specific to the Prescott. We have several places we call dispersed rec sites that are numbered and signed so folks recognize them as a place to camp. The campfires are not allowed in those dispersed sites.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
The other part of the restriction is the smoking. Folks are required to either smoke in their vehicle in a building or in those developed campgrounds in an area clear of vegetation, and a minimum of a 10-foot circle, really. Ideally, it would be just stay indoors with the smoking.
Let me ask you this. Now, if I'm out there and I build myself a campfire, let's say this weekend, and you guys come out and I'm dispersed camping where I've just found a nice secluded quiet spot that I'm going to hang out for the weekend, what's going to potentially happen here?
Most likely, one of our prevention officers, if not some other law enforcement, we certainly sometimes we rely on the Sheriff's Department or other law enforcement, but if it's our own Forest Service patrols or Forest Service law enforcement, ordinarily we'll first start with just notification and education to try to gain compliance right away. If it's a persistent issue or something blatant, it is a potential $5,000 fine or 6 months in jail. If that fire were to escape and cause natural resource damage, the fines could certainly go up. And then certainly, worst case scenario, if an escape illegal campfire went and did damage beyond that to infrastructure, private property, who knows what the repercussions could be.
Have you heard any talk this year where we're going to have like a zero tolerance? Because you know, there's certain DUI patrols and stuff where it's like zero tolerance, no seatbelt, zero tolerance. Do you know if we're going to have kind of a zero tolerance like that? Where, I mean, we've talked about this for years about campfires and the proper way to put them out and all that stuff. Are we at that zero tolerance stage where you go out there and you find it and it's like, here's your ticket, or we're not at that stage?
There's nothing official afoot anyway as far as a Forest Service campaign for zero tolerance. You know, certainly our first goal always is to try to educate folks so they understand the implications of why we're in restrictions and what this potential hazard is. But it's not to say that depending on the situation, we may resort to violation right away. Particularly, I would suspect if we find abandoned campfires, where folks have just left it to go do something else, we'll try to track those folks down, and that probably will result in a fine, as opposed to someone who maybe just didn't get word right away. We'll often try, like I said, to gain compliance first.
Now, you mentioned to me before the show that restrictions are based on science. Tell me about some of the science that you guys look at.
Sure. Where we start every time we give this some consideration, and before we implement restrictions, we'll look, number one, at the forest conditions, the fuels, in other words, the stuff that will burn. And we look at a couple of different things. First and foremost, we have a couple of indices that we use to measure potential. Without getting into too much of the science, it has to do with the energy release that can be estimated at the flaming front of a large fire. It's something we call ERC, and again, to stay away from some of the science that would be a little hard to explain in a short period of time, it essentially gives us a trend as opposed to short time frame. We have other indices we can decide on a daily basis conditions. This ERC allows us to look ahead at where we've been and where we're trending over several weeks with the lack of moisture, for example.
Okay.
And where we are right now, generally speaking, in the simplest of terms, we are about a month ahead of where we were last year. When we came in about the 1st of April, looking at that particular indice, we were at values that we were seeing at the 1st of May last year.
Wow.
Big picture, though, the same values that we are in now on this ERC scale is about maximum that we've ever seen in 25 years of data for April. We've still got a ways to go. It certainly is going to get drier. That indice will continue to elevate as we get into June, but we're seeing records there for April. The other big thing that we look at is the fuel moisture, both the live fuel, the standing chaparral, the trees, the juniper, the pine trees, as well as the dead fuel, the stuff on the ground, the twigs, the sticks, the logs, the leaf litter. We look at the moisture content of all of that stuff, and we are again seeing records for April, particularly as these, what we call the 1,000-hour fuels, and I know Denny was here from the county sharing some of that. We've seen on a couple of fires, both in the Prescott area and on the rim above Sedona in the last few weeks, where we've had some small fires. Those big logs were burning to white ash rather immediately.
What does that mean?
That means that they are extraordinarily dry. Typically, those heavy logs are the last to lose their moisture. Because they're so big, it takes such a long period of time for them to lose their moisture, wicking away by wind or just the dry environment around them. They tend to hold moisture, and when we have winter snowpack in an ordinary year, and maybe it hasn't been so ordinary in the last 10 or 15 years, but ordinarily with snowpack, those larger fuels, those 1,000-hour logs, tend to soak that moisture up to where inside the core is somewhat moist, whether it's a decadent old log that's spongy, or a relatively newer dead log. There's still usually a lot of moisture contact inside, so that the outside shell is what tends to burn in a fire this time of year. We don't usually see them burning to white ash till we get into June, when it's in the 80s and 90s and a single digit or double digit RH. So it's very dry. It's very volatile.
Would you say it's extreme?
Extreme. The only reason I hesitate there is we use that as an actual indice. That descriptor, it's tied to some indices that we haven't gotten to yet.
Okay.
But I would say it's very volatile, and it is certainly extreme relative to where we should be in April. We haven't. When you see Smokey's arm on the sign, or we publish in the newspaper our fire conditions, it's not quite extreme yet. That's tied to some other indices. But I would certainly say it's volatile and extreme departure from where we would be normally.
What do we have to see to actually get to that point?
What we'll see is obviously this ERC again continuing up. I think in simplest terms, I'll just say we will continue to see the moisture in these dead fuels, and what I didn't address yet is the live fuels is of concern right now as well. As the live fuels continue to lose moisture in the drier summer periods, it just becomes all that much more dry and available where, and this is probably worth addressing if I could go back just a second and talk about the live fuel moistures.
You know what? Maybe we should take a break.
You got it?
We talked about the dead. We'll come back and talk about the live fuels when we come back from the break, okay?
Sure.
Pete Gordon in studio today. He's with the Prescott National Forest. He's a fire staff officer. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll take a quick 2-minute break and we'll be right back.
A full life, measured in seats, starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Learn how to prevent deaths and injuries by using the right car seat for your child's age and size.
Know what?
What?
Since I got adopted, I've learned a lot about these humans.
I know. I mean, check out these two. It's Flirt City over here.
Yeah, I noticed that. It looks like my human is definitely into your human.
Oh, look! I think she's getting his number.
Nice.
Your human's got some sweet moves.
Takes after his dog. Oh, look, they're doing that thing where they put their arms around each other.
She kicked up a leg. It's like in the movies.
That's awesome. Looks like we're going to be hanging out a little bit more.
One of the areas still maturing in an adolescent brain is the prefrontal cortex. So when we take drugs, we alter key motivational circuits, changing the wiring needed for the cognitive function of the brain. Until we can't totally deal with things like memory, thinking things out, and even learning stuff.
The signs are there. So is our help. Visit the partnership at drugfree.org for practical advice on coping with teen drug use.
When you're out there, there's no telling what you'll find.
I see it, I see it! Oh, look at you.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back to Countywide. Great to have you in studio today. Pete Gordon with the Prescott National Forest in studio. Today we're talking about, of course, the wildfire season. Restrictions go into place at 8 a.m. on April 18th. So campfires, smoking, all that. Smoking inside enclosed vehicles, buildings, or designated campgrounds, as well as the campfires, too. So no more dispersed camping, not at least until hopefully the monsoon arrives and we get plenty of moisture.
Yeah, now camping is certainly allowed in those dispersed sites, but you're just not allowed to smoke or have a campfire.
Well, let me ask you this. Okay, a lot of things that have been, before we jump into the live fields like we're going to, but I thought about this on the way down this morning. They've been selling some of these propane-operated sort of fire pits. It's a fire ring that's propane. Is that okay to use in a dispersed camping with an on-off switch?
Yes, I believe it is. I'd have to go do some little research. I have the stuff here in front of me. I think right now it's all just natural wood burning or charcoal or coal and those kind of things. If you have a self-contained, like a Coleman stove or a propane warming fire, at this point those are still legal as long as it's contained. And again, I'd encourage clear the brush around your site if you're going to use one of those.
Give yourself a wide swath, because if the wind picks up any of that fire, then boom, there you go. All right, let's talk live fuels. You were starting to say that the dead fuels are already bone dry. Yes. The live fuels, you guys are really concerned about those.
We are, and when I say live fuels, I'm talking about the standing green vegetation that ordinarily is green this time of year. For us in Yavapai County, both in the Verde Valley and in the Prescott area, it's that chaparral species, the oak and the scrub, the manzanita species, and Wellsar grasses. This year, we are probably about 10 to 15% on average below where we would be in those live fuel moistures.
How bad is that?
It's pretty bad. You know, one of the things we like to see, and it's usually this time of year, is those plants usually flush this time of year, coming out of winter and into the spring. Just like folks may see on their landscaping, things tend to bud out and leaf out. We're seeing a little bit of lag in that, and we do some sampling on a weekly basis, and we're watching that we're, again, 10 to 15% behind in some of the oak species, the shrub oak species, and the manzanita species. Ordinarily, this time of year, that will impede to some degree fire progression. If we were to get a fire to start, ordinarily as the grass greens up and as these plants flush out with moisture internally, the fires have a little trouble spreading through green or moister vegetation. When it's not happening, of course, now it's just that much more available to propagate a fire. So it's a bit of a concern for us. It is greening up a little bit out there. I'm sure folks are noticing some of the shorter grasses are coming in green, but certainly not what we would call normal. We usually see a nice blanket of green coming out of a winter into the springtime.
Right, you really don't see that.
No.
You know, if you go travel up and down I-17, I mentioned on Tuesday's show, there really is, you could see a little bit of green here and there, but for the most part, it's brown.
It is, and a lot of that brown, we had a wonderful response to last year's monsoon with a lot of grass growth throughout the county and on the forest. And So that is all there available without much green up coming in underneath.
There's also a lack of wildflowers this year, I noticed as well. You see a few here and there, but for the most part, wildflowers are non-existent. I don't know if you can answer this question for me, but I remember the last time we had a year, it seemed like it was this dry, the bark beetle came in.
Sure.
And I'd never heard of him before.
Yeah.
And it was that year that all of a sudden we noticed over in Crown King, just the whole forest was decimated by him, and you could drive over towards Pace and you'd see these clusters of 50, 60 trees where it was just these brown clumps everywhere. And I believe we went in and removed most of that, but that's got to be a concern with another dry year.
Yeah, I think absolutely it is. Certainly it's not my area of expertise, but I can tell you that when we see drought persist the way it has for 15 years or so, and then have these exceptionally dry springs, winters and springs, I think the conditions are ripe for those types of infestations. I'm not aware that we're seeing any influx yet, but it is certainly a concern. I think you're right on with these extremely dry winters on top of drought. Makes the pine trees more susceptible and hard to resist.
It was a brutal winter.
Yeah.
It was like a long fall, early, long spring. It was really amazing. How about added patrols this weekend, and how are the resources for this year's wildfire season? I noticed when the Fisher Fire touched off, they were on it like that. Johnny on the spot. 175 acres is all it got. And I remember Heather Noel was telling me by Saturday morning, the day after that thing started, they pretty much had a line around that, and they were working on squishing that thing right into the middle. Yeah. There was very little smoke coming off it on Saturday. Friday was quite a sight, but Saturday, not much.
Yep, absolutely. I think the first thing I can address, before I get into specific numbers, is the coordination, the cooperation in Arizona, period, let alone the gigantic network we have nationally to tap into resources. But specific to the Fisher Fire, not only did the Coconino National Forest and the fire departments around Flagstaff respond to that, we actually sent our Prescott hotshots. They have responded Friday afternoon within an hour of the call.
Wow.
And so they spent that evening and 2 or 3 days on that fire assisting. And that's a common practice for us to share resources among the national forests and within our fire departments across state and district and forest boundaries. There's tremendous cooperation. So we have a lot of resources, frankly, to tap into. Specific numbers for the Prescott National Forest, we'll have 5 of our fire engines on this year, fully staffed 7 days a week, which we just started doing this last week. We have 4 of our lookouts staffed, our tanker base is open. We'll have our helicopter with the Helitac crew on starting May 1st. Our hotshot crew is already on and available. As a matter of fact, they just left yesterday, or 2 days ago. They're assisting the Coronado National Forest with a large fire down near Sierra Vista. Regionally speaking, we can tap into 111 Forest Service engines, and again, that doesn't count all the engines that come from neighboring fire departments.
Sure.
We have a wonderful cooperation there. There are 20 of those hotshot crews in this region between Arizona and New Mexico, and of course, there's over 60 of them nationally that we can tap into if the Southwest sees a busy season. I mentioned the air tanker base is open. While there's no air tankers stationed in Prescott, that shift was back in about 2003 or so. Those air tankers now respond to where the need is, but we can certainly host them if there's a need. They can come and they can stay in Prescott, and we certainly refuel and add more retardant out of Prescott. There'll be 15 air tankers nationally, 4 of which are the new generation, these new BA&E models, the jet engine air tankers, and then a lot of press the last couple of years, the DC-10s. There are 2 of them.
Yeah, those are pretty impressive.
What we call the VLAT, or the very large air tankers. 2 of them on contract with the Forest Service. Again, available nationally and to us.
It'd be nice not to see them fly over this year.
It is always
Would
nice.
it be great?
It would be great not to see. A sitting air tanker is a good air tanker.
Yeah, it sure is. Just sitting there doing nothing is exactly what it should be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take our second break, and then we come back. We got a punch list of other things we got to talk about, okay?
You got it.
So let's take a quick 2-minute break. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Thanks for calling the GED Pep Talk Center. Jerry Stiller speaking. Your level 7 in-your-face pep talk.
I can keep pushing you. Believe me, I'm good at it. But at some point, you're going to need to start pushing yourself.
See, once you've got your GED diploma, you'll feel so good about yourself.
You tell them. You can't change your past, but you can definitely change your future.
That makes me so happy, I'm ready to bust out a dance.
Mr. Trejo,
transfer this guy to you. My gentle technique isn't really working. You need something a little more
persuasive.
Yes.
You listen, and you listen good.
Hey, where's my sandwich? Terry? Terry!
Take it from me, the King DMC. It's a real cool thing to get your GED.
Get that diploma!
Now hold on and we'll find you free GED classes. Capiche?
Whatever motivation you need, we've got a pep talk for you. Get your GED pep talk and find free classes at yourged.org.
I'm one unlucky guy. The chance of being involved in a robbery is 1 in 757. The chances of being struck by lightning 1 in 750,000.
Please fasten your seatbelts for unexpected turbulence.
The chances of being a victim in an airline crash 1 in 29 million. Hey, could I get some peanuts? The chances of being involved in a car crash are far greater than lightning strikes and plane crashes. And if you are texting while driving, your risk of crash increases 23 times. Now, I may be an unlucky guy, but I don't have to be part of that statistic, and neither do you. Drive responsibly.
Welcome back to Countywide. We have just a few minutes left of the program. Hope you're learning all kinds of stuff about our wildfire season this year. It could be a dangerous one if we're not careful. There's a campaign in California that we were talking about before the show, One Less Spark, One Less Wildfire. Let's talk about that a little bit because we've brought that to Arizona.
Yes, the entire region, the Southwest region, embraced this in the fall, and there's been a lot of work going on this winter. We expect to have some websites up here fairly soon specific to the Southwest. But what this campaign is, it's a departure from the typical Smokey Bear campaign. And in the past, and we currently still do, obviously, the Smokey Bear campaign is really geared towards the recreating public with their campfires and, of course, young children. This new campaign of One Less Spark, One Less Wildfire is really geared towards you and I as homeowners and a little bit of the industry business or industry that might be up against the wildland urban interface. And it targets what we might be doing around our yard, whether it's welding the horse corral, fixing a gate, a fence, mowing lawns, doing things that can cause a spark that we may not ordinarily think about.
You said that too, lawnmower.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Kick out a rock and there's a spark and boom, now you got a fire.
Absolutely, especially if you're dealing with the grasses that we just talked about.
Chainsaws.
You bet. And that's the other half of this campaign is industrial-like stuff, whether we're doing, folks that might be doing work that's not necessarily on public land, but adjacent to the wildlands. And as we know, the wildlands has no jurisdiction. So this campaign targets that, and it's really just an education notification to kind of think. It's based on common sense of maybe taking that extra second to think about what you're about to do and what are the conditions you're about to do it in, what's the environment you're about to do it in, and you know, even simple things like making sure the safety chains are attached securely when you're towing a trailer.
Right.
Can't tell you how many times across the country we've had multiple starts along highways just simply because something was dragging behind a vehicle, things like that. So this new campaign is very simple, and it's a kind of a new audience for us to kind of think common sense about those things we might do that ordinarily you don't really associate with forest fires. We tend to think of forest fires as cigarettes or campfires or lightning, and it's not always in the forest, and it's not always those causes that cause us trouble.
That forest lines our interstates and our highways.
Yep.
It's just out there, and it's so much of it between every city and town, too.
Yep.
There's a
lines
lot
our
of forest out there.
Yep.
I had a person last year who went horseback riding and realized that their horse's shoes were kicking off sparks, and so they got off the horse and took the horse back and trailered it because they were worried about starting a fire.
Sure.
Real quick, we've only got a couple seconds left. We also want people building campfires in strong winds.
Yes.
Keep those down?
Absolutely. Of course, now with the restrictions there, it's going to further restrict where and when we can do those campfires. But to me, it really boils down to, again, a common sense. I've said it a few times that if it's really windy outside, or if it's not windy but just really dry, as it's going to start getting drier and drier, give some serious thought to whether you really need to build that campfire. And first of all, pay attention to the ordinances, because it's beyond just the Forest Service now. The county, Yavapai County, for example, has a burn ban on. So I think that's going to eliminate people having campfires in their yards.
All right, we're done. We're out of time. Pete, great to meet you.
My
Thanks
pleasure.
for coming in. Very
My
informative. I'm Paul David. That's today's Countywide, and we will talk to you again next time. Be safe.